Heading the list, Councillor Cooper and then Councillor Watson. So, no, Councillor, so we're actually starting with Councillor Watson. No, Councillor Cooper is... Okay. Yep.
Okay. Thank you. And just at the outset, I won't be repeating this. So this is my contribution to the budget debate. I won't be following with the governing body meeting. In terms of what's presented in the mayoral proposal, I kind of found it a remarkably candid analysis of Auckland's budgetary position and its associated work program, and I commend the Mayor for that. 2019-20 is the second year of the 10-year budget, which in itself signalled this $26 billion investment referred to in the second paragraph. We're told initially that ATAP is starting to roll out, but in something of an understatement also in the same breath that much more remains to be done, and that's self-evident as you drive around Auckland. I would just say I suspect this decade Aucklanders might be a little more unforgiving than they have been thus far in terms of seeing progress delivered on the ground and with some speed, because we've been hearing that for some time now. And if you read some of the articles in the local papers about situations in Kumeu and Silverdale and places like that, you'll get a sense that that need to really amp up the delivery is becoming something of a call to arms, I think, but certainly from some of the communities I'm familiar with. The same, I think, might go to for the rather euphemistically entitled additional funding commitments, which might more colloquially be seen as some of these cost blowouts that are now becoming apparent in this budget. Indeed, the Mayor makes no secret of the consequences of that, such as the CRL, which has basically gone from 2.4 billion when it was approved with councillors a few years ago to 4.4 billion now, and the latest increase of which manifests itself in this budget of that $500 million extra contribution, and not just the contribution, but as the Mayor says, what comes with that, and that is the limited capacity to respond to emerging cost pressures, new funding requests, external shocks, and additionally, which we haven't identified yet, how we're going to actually deal with that in terms of alternative thinking and non-rate-based services. So these things don't happen in isolation, as we know. We have additional funding commitments, such as we've already seen with the America's Cup last year. The Dolphins, though that sounded a little bit more hopeful with what the Mayor was saying there, and some other ones lurking in the background, like the quite galling eightfold increase in potentially any decision to do with Western Spring. So I hope those sorts of funding commitments in the future are dealt with a lot less sympathetically than they have been thus far, because I think it's been a little too easy for some of our brethren within the Auckland Council just to rock up and get big sums of money doled out to them without too much in the way of convincing explanation. And that's important, because our interest payments, currently are $470 million a year. With give or take $100,000 or so, that's $1.3 million every single day of the year. And when you combine that in terms of disposal of assets or community property, I would suggest also going forward that communities are going to be far less willing to see assets or property within their communities sold off just to disappear into the debt ether or to accommodate these big blowouts. That's certainly what I'm picking up as a councillor anyway. I think what definitely does merit comment here, and I'll be commenting on, is the Mayor's reference to a need also to be a budget which looks after our communities and our people, and I commend him on that, specifically in terms of the Auckland City's mission, Home Ground project, and also in the instance of my own ward with the Hibiscus Coast Youth Centre, where there is clearly an inequitable situation, and where, to his credit, this Mayor has stepped in and made a grant to the most vulnerable, to the most people in need in our community. So I thank him wholeheartedly for that, because without his intervention, those young people would be in a dire position. But I do echo that need to balance the big shiny infrastructure with the people that live in Auckland, increasing numbers of which are in varying degrees of need. Just a few very quick comments on the specifics, particularly as it goes to some of the elements that have exercised councillors that far. I support the ferry integration. To me, that's something that was coming about anyway, and again, as a matter of equity, if we look at the ferries from Gulf Harbour, for instance, they're $330 for a monthly pass, just shy of $4,000 a year. Costs to and from the ferry should be integrated, so that's not quite as big a concession as it might seem. That's a matter of fairness when we compare it with the bus network. Similarly, with the free weekend and public holiday travel, that's certainly something that's meritorious, but I hope again that it's balanced by removal of things not quite so meritorious, like the almost comical subsidy to the most wealthy suburbs in Devonport and Stanley Bay, where we're subsidising those people to the tune of at least $14 a trip, in some cases up to $40 a trip. That's a ludicrous situation. And it looks especially ludicrous when you balance it against the money that's going into that's going into the fare integration and the weekend and public holiday travel. So I hope on the one hand, while we are innovative and looking to be more inclusive and more equitable, that we cut out the things that clearly aren't, and that's certainly a shining example of that. Finally, Mr. Chair, just a reference to, in some ways, a relatively obscure reference in the mayoral proposal, and that's the Roman numeral 19 at the very end, to do with Regional Facilities Auckland, but perhaps not so much to do with them, but to do with this request that the Chief Executive review the circumstances surrounding the revived cost of the Aotea Centre refurbishment, which we know is some $14 million, I think, from memory. Not so much that, but the notion of accountability, I think, is one that increasingly needs to be made in our budgets, and particularly when it goes to individual instances of blowout or cost increases. I feel that to date that hasn't happened. There's been a lack of accountability and certainly a lack of thorough explanation, and that goes as recently to the CRL, where that was substandard. The explanations that were getting given up for a cost blowout of that magnitude. So I again commend the Mayor. If that's to be a new culture of examination, of accountability, then that's well overdue, and I think that will be supported by Aucklanders as a whole. But as I said, my introductory remarks, I think this is a candid analysis that the Mayor has done here in terms of both the positives and the very questionable future that perhaps exists as a result of things that have happened in the very recent past, and what their consequences are going forward. So thank you for that opportunity to talk to his proposal.
Thank you. So, councillors, I gave Councillor Walker 9 minutes there because he indicated he wasn't going to speak in the governing body meeting.
Councillor Watson.
Sorry, Councillor Watson, sorry.
That's okay.
But could refer to everyone. So I'm just, so anyone else wishes to debate? Councillor Walker.
I'll follow on from Councillor Watson, make a few comments. And what I want to refer to in particular are the risks that are noted down in the attachment, and in particular, the risks that are associated with construction inflation, public transport growth, and especially CRL-related costs. And my concern especially is around the determination, which is yet to be made, of the future ownership and the operating arrangements for the CRL. And the immediate imperative for us to work that through. Because my belief, and I would suggest it is a belief shared by many councillors, and I would suggest would be shared by the overwhelming majority of Aucklanders, is that that project is rightly a Kiwi Rail project, is rightly subsidising money that the government would otherwise be spending on roading initiatives via NZTA. And we need to negotiate a better deal, and we should be doing that right now so that we can forecast that and we can adjust our budgets accordingly. So that is of great concern that we have that unknown at such an advanced stage of that project because it's already started. And I am very concerned about the possible overruns that may come from increases in construction and other issues around that project. And again, I say that we need scenario-based planning around a number of things so that we have got an idea of what to do. And I was asking that question a year or two ago around the CRL and suggesting that we could be looking at as much as $1 billion, and that proved true. The other concern that I've got generally that goes to the presentation material on the part of RFA around the various parts of their enterprise that are suffering increasing financial losses. Equally, those principles apply to other parts of our operation, and that is the urgency around having transparency and cost centres so that we know, if we look at the Aotea Centre, what the capital is, what the revenue is, what the expenses are, equally the zoo, equally the individual stadiums, equally assets that apply to Panuku, such as marinas and so on, that they're proposing to flog off, and no doubt may be coming back to us about, and also adequate oversight over water care and Auckland Transport as it goes to significant projects, so that we've got absolute oversight over those projects. And if it's something like the Devonport trial that Councillor Watson referred to, we know how it's performing and we know how to shut it if it's not performing and divert that budget to something that might be, for example, the subsidy for youth on buses. If we're in a constrained financial environment, and we are, we have to make the absolute best of the money that we've got. And the only way that you can run a household budget, or any budget for that matter, and ours is significant, is when you know where the money's going. And we don't know where the money's going. All we see are some big figures, but we don't have the information to drill down. And when I try to get the information and drill down so that I've got better oversight because I'm interested in that, I can't get it. And the Chief Financial Officer, Matthew Walker, knows that, and hopefully that's a work in progress. I am absolutely encouraged with the funding for the Youth Centre for the Hibiscus Coast. That's fantastic because we've got one of the highest youth suicide rates in New Zealand, and that's a message to councillors that areas that aren't the south or aren't the west can also be suffering. It is imperative, though, for us to have a regional fund and for us to have equity, and hence my urging for the report on that, because we need more equity across the region. I'm also encouraged that there is a grant to Eden Park as compared to a loan, and we know that that decision effectively saves the council via RFA more than $500 million in capital that we would otherwise be spending elsewhere. And if we were to keep Speedway at Western Springs, improve it for concerts, then we'd be up to, I would suggest, at least 650 million, maybe 700 million. And these are the sorts of decisions that we as councillors need to have accurate information and financials and options about. And I'm asking for those things, and again, I'm not getting them, and that goes to the venue development strategy. That's been shelved yet again, thankfully, because from my perspective, it doesn't cover off the options that we need to see. I've raised some issues, I've raised some questions, and they essentially will feed into the next annual plan, and I would hope information that enables us to make good decisions there in an environment where we're probably going to be just as financially constrained than we are now, and I would suggest even more.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Walker. Sorry, excuse me. We're hoping that we do get the officer feedback on the various questions that were raised, and we're trying to get it within this committee and within this debate. Councillor Hills.
Thank you, Chair, and I won't be too long. Just want to, first of all, congratulate the staff for pulling this all together and weaving it all in, you know, from looking at the $500 million increase for the City Rail Link. This could have been a very, very difficult annual budget in any other sense, where we may have had to have been removing or cutting projects or deciding to put up rates higher than 2.5%, but we've managed to do that, and the staff have actually done that for us. So of all the hits and criticisms and bullying often staff get around this place, they're actually doing a huge amount of work for us, so thank you. Next, just want to quickly comment on public transport. From the SOI, yep, public transport patronage is up $3.5 million from where we expected. I want to see more certainty in the future, because clearly we should be expecting to be higher, because the phenomenal figures we've seen in the last 5 years especially has shown that we are always growing ahead of where we are maybe expecting, so we need to be expecting even higher. In my area, you know, there are things happening. We've got 10 new pedestrian crossings in the last year or so, safety projects that are actually happening outside schools and town centres that people are appreciating and seeing the difference, which will have a phenomenal change to the safety around our schools and town centres, which is fantastic. Just want to thank the Mayor and other councillors who will be supporting the two things that Councillor Darby and I got to the table, and thank Auckland Transport for being so quick with all the options. I would love to be a bit more exciting, few more bigger options, but we just don't have, you know, we did look at the school buses only would be $6 million, but actually making it free across all modes for kids and school children would be up to $40 million, and could add another 300 buses and 300 drivers to the system, which would be great, but we know we're having issues keeping up with capacity as we are. So this is two realistic and I think options that will make a difference. Been asking for very many years about the integration with ferry, bus and train. I believe it should have been done around the hop, but there was some complications at that time, but that will make a huge difference. That will free up the park and rides around the ferry terminals for those who need to or don't have access to the ferry feeder buses, and it will fill up that latent capacity of ferry feeder buses and help the system, the network that's we're all fighting for better in that area. The kids free in the weekends. I got so much feedback last year on that Friday before Christmas of families who had never taken public transport with their kids before because it just never made sense. It was easier to get in the car, find a car park somewhere else, or they just wouldn't go further than the local, the mall or shops or parks. That really opened it up for people to take their kids on public transport, and I think this is a step towards opening up Auckland in the weekends at least for those families with a couple of kids or more. That actually gives them that opportunity to get out, get around our city, learn how to use our transport system, and encourage people to have the confidence to continue to use the public transport system in the future. I believe 1.1 million is a pretty low amount for what I feel like will be transformational for those two options. And I'm really keen to continue to look at those across the board. We are seeing huge growth. In the new network this month, the April figures was 17% increase in journeys from last year, which is massive. That's huge month-on-month growth we're seeing, and people are turning to public transport, and it will have an effect on congestion, and it will actually improve our city, our health of our people and the environment, and I think we're doing a great job in that case. Everything else, I think, we can work on a lot of things, but there is a lot in this budget. It's building on the LTP that we consulted on quite widely last year, and the water quality and the environment stuff we're seeing on the ground, the Kodi protection and tracks in our forests in Kaipatiki, and the water quality issues on the shore, Takapuna Beach, Lake Pupuki, Milford Estuary. That work is streaming ahead, and community are mentioning that they can see a difference, or at least the work being done to work on that. So just want to thank everyone around the table and the work that you've done, Chair and the Mayor, on this. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hills. Councillor Cashmore.
Thanks, Mr Chair. And I'd just like to recognise the words that Councillor Watson said when he identified our debt and the interest and the pressures. So Legacy Council's largely funded asset builds from cash. And with the amount of growth that we have now, and with the legacy builds that did not happen under that old system, something smarter had to be delivered. And that is the asset program that we now have. And I just remind councillors, not long ago we signed off on the LTP, which had record investments, $26 billion, $2.6 billion a year, on our community facilities, on our parks, on our water quality, on our environment, as Councillor Hills has just said. And also $28 billion on ATAP. And again, Councillor Watson is on the money that ATAP needs to be delivered at a quicker rate to equalise our population increases, which are at record highs. So we used to sort of grow at, 12,000 a year. Well, now we're doing 40. That is back a touch from the 50 we had experienced last year, but it's still record high population growth, giving us record high pressures on our delivery. This council does a 10-year budget. It has a 30-year plan, and that 10-year budget's funding towards that plan. What is missing? And it doesn't matter which political party you support, or any of them, is that government alignment with that work. We need guaranteed funding for that 10 years from the partnership with the Crown if we're going to progress it, not year by year. We don't need to witness the dramas we've had with NZTA this past year. That has caused some serious issues at Auckland Transport and a lost year of development and capital builds on our networks. The annual plan is a scoping exercise. It conforms to the LTP's bigger requirements, and it does refinement along those scopes to deliver on an annualised basis. But we must not detract from that long-term set of goals that have been delivered through the LTP, or we will veer off course from what has to be done as the essential work of this council. So I encourage all of us to stand behind the Mayor's pronouncements here today. It is pragmatic, it is sensible, and it gives a degree of certainty and security for us going forward. We will have ongoing challenges, and there might be the odd surprise going forward, but we pragmatically step through these challenges in a sensible way. We can get there. The real issue is we've got to bring Auckland with us. So collectively, we have to be the chair people for this great city, because without that, you will get lost in the mires of distraction and negativity. So I'd really encourage my fellow councillors to stand up and be proud of what's been achieved and what's been planned, because there's an awful lot out there to be proud of. Record expenditures in OPEX and CAPEX within a constrained budget, and rates increases that have never been so low and are lower than any other metropolitan city in this country. It's a good budget, Mr Chairman, and thank you for your part in it, and it needs to be supported.
Thank you, Councillor Cashmore. Councillor Darby, and then I have Councillor Cooper.
Oh, thanks, Chair. I want to acknowledge the Mayor's Office Finance team for putting this to us, and we've all had the opportunity to contribute to this as well, so it's built out of all of us and led by the Mayor. Look, just a few highlights here. I entirely support the allocation of $5 million to Homeground. I think that's a remarkable project, and we know the pressures that some that just don't have the opportunity that probably all of us around this table have had to lead lives that, you know, where we can go home and be housed and be comfortable and be warm and be fed. That particular project is just a very deserving project and delightful architecture and a lovely home for Aucklanders who need it. I'm also, Councillor Filipaina, you'll be also happy to see the progression of the long-awaited motorsport park. That has been long anticipated. With my climate change hat on, I'm sort of finding, you know, why am I supporting motorsport? But look, it's there, and look, we've got to consolidate, and this is a really good, efficient way of that consolidation. So, hats off to all engaged, Councillor Filipaina and Councillor Fiso-Collins on that one. A little bit of echo on the work that we've been doing on fares. And I think the Mayor's Office again on that. Councillor Hills, our work with Auckland Transport since I think December. We brought that matter to a workshop, and we looked at some dozen fare scenarios. I'm keen to progress that work. Councillor Casey, I think you've got a really good point that you raised in the workshop of focusing that in on our young people and those that don't have the income elasticity to afford to board public transport. And I think working with government on community service card holder category is probably one of my picks to be examined acutely going forward. And we'll see that in our mode shift program with the government and other work streams with Auckland Transport. I do thank Auckland Transport for their willingness to just get with us and run those scenarios as they did in double quick time. They were robust. We tested a lot of numbers there, and we've got two key ones that have floated to the top, and we're going to confirm today. Good to hear the lessons on fiscal prudence by some speakers here today. I just do want to maybe rewind a couple of months and look at that $10 million that we allocated to Eden Park without that fiscal prudence. Of course, we didn't practice those words there. I say that generally because it was a council vote, wasn't it? But alarm bells on the Aotea Centre as well, and the Mayor is absolutely correct that we've got to dig further on that one. We've got to understand that one better. I am very, very concerned with the level of overrun linked to the cladding issues there. Overall, though, once you confirm this budget, the tank is looking pretty empty. And from now on, I think we've got to hunker down and actually support this whole organisation, all the CCOs, the Court Council, and we've got to deliver on this budget and the LTP budget. This is the building budget Mark II after the building budget of the LTP. But I can see that the next few years are going to be about the governance of this council at the governing body and local boards, about the guiding the way, enabling the way for all of our teams, all parts of our council to get all hands to the mill and to build on the back of these budget allocations. They are extremely significant. The LTP with this is going to make Auckland look a very different city in time. So with that, I will be offering my support to all the recommendations.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I feel really positive for our city. We do have lots of big, shiny infrastructure projects, but they're absolutely necessary. And when I look at the CRL and we talk about, oh, it's just for the central city, for me, coming from the west, and I know Councillor Cooper too, we built our old former council chambers, new ones, over a transport hub because we looked forward to having a better link to the city. And once CRL is delivered, we'll have a southern platform and it'll cut 15 minutes off that time, and that makes it a really good 30-minute commute. And so for people that say that these things are not necessary, they're absolutely necessary, and they've been planned for over nearly 100 years. So these are long overdue, and sometimes you just have to make those hard decisions. And what I'm really proud of is that, yes, it will cost this council another $500 million. That's our share. However, we're able to do it without putting up the rates this year. And that's really critical. So we've stuck to our promise that we voted for in the long-term plan. And that's what's really critical here. We're able to manage our debt so prudently, and this word debt ether had me a little bit puzzled, because I look on page 20 of this report and it shows how we're managing our debt and keeping it under our self-imposed 265% of debt to revenue ratio, and well under the 270, which is the legal requirement. So the fact that we can deliver a massive project, the biggest project ever in New Zealand's history, and still keep our debt levels under the cap, I think that is something to be proud of. And I guess for me, a lot of this is around, we can, sometimes, we're not prudent. We can give away money to one group, but then say, no, don't sell something else and keep things that don't give us revenue. It's all over the place. But for me, I think we need to be leaders who cheer on our city rather than criticise our own decisions. Doesn't make for a healthy city. It doesn't make for confidence in the governorship of this city. Sound bites are really easy. 2 to 3 word sound bites with nothing to back them up, really easy. And we know how hard it is to explain the real situation, but when you really have those one-to-one conversations with your community or just people in your community, I've had one last week about Speedway. Now, like, oh God, I see what's going to happen. That's really great. Can I look at the concept plan that we all saw in November? Oh yes, that's fantastic. Last night at our Henderson Massey local board, we had that out in the community at Te Atatu South Community Centre, and I talked about the small steps we're making with public transport, but people really loved the idea that we could provide something extra, use up our extra capacity without millions and millions of dollars and overstretching the capacity. So, and people were nodding and going, yeah, that's really great. So people that don't like stuff being given out for free were happy because it wasn't too much, it was really good increments. And that's exactly what the Deputy Mayor talks about when taking people along with you. If you take the time to explain it, rather than just using derogatory sound bites that don't help anybody in our city, I think people are happy. And the other thing, just a little thing, a nod to our Waitakere Rangers community. Very pleased to see that we're not going to go ahead with scrapping their septic tank pump out service, and that we're going to work with that community to find a way to keep that, but also make it work for the wider region and not be a burden on that. So I really commend this. You can't do much in an annual plan year, but I actually think what we're doing here is really significant, and it has responded to different people around the table in their communities, and I think that's always what you've got to do. They're little increments, and they're found within existing budgets, a lot of them, which shows that compounds our savings. 560 million will be over 10 years. That is phenomenal. That's $500 million savings. So when people talk about runaway costs, we're going to save $500 million that we would have had with a hugely growing city. 4 years, the size of Hamilton, we've grown. So I think we're doing really well. And we'll always have criticism, but we have to be really positive and confident in our decisions here. Thank you.
Right, councillors, I'm just going to ask Robert and Michael to come forward. Do I see them somewhere? Or is it Ross? Just a minute, and we'll just get the feedback on the questions asked by various councillors before we head to a vote. Well, there is no one else wishes to comment at this stage.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to speak, but I've been waiting for some of the answers.
The answers are here. This is what we're there. Right. Reveal all.
Reveal. Thank you. So yes, through the chair, we've just been going through getting the answers for the councillors, for Councillor Fletcher and Councillor Walker. So the first question coming through from Councillor Fletcher, so that was the total spend for arts and culture. So for this current financial year, 2018, the expenditure budget is 13.1 million, and that for next year is sitting at 13.2 million. And in terms of the relevant percentage of the overall Auckland Council entity budget, that's about a 1% on the total budget. So it's about $1 billion worth of expenditure. The other question was on the expenditure for social policy. So again, the amount for this current financial year is 7.5 million. And for next financial year, that goes to 7.6 million. So that's the social policy team. The question on the total spend for RFA. So the 2018-19 year number, and we've just been reviewing back to the budget book that was provided, the numbers were provided by RFA as part of the budget book, was 13.4 million, and that goes to 13.6 million next year. However, we're just checking back in our system. It looks like it's actually moved slightly up from what was in the budget book, but it goes to 14 million.
That's for the art gallery specifically within the RFA budgets.
Yeah. And again, RFA do have where a lot of their maintenance and their facilities is all held centrally. So I think this is the bulk of the operating costs. Yep. Then moving on to the questions for Councillor Walker. So the first one was on the grants. So unfortunately, we spoke to Lee Redshaw. He unfortunately was travelling to a meeting, so he couldn't attend. So I'll do my best to relay his response. So effectively, over the last 10 years, there's only been 2 new loans undertaken by Auckland Council. And that relates to Muriwai Surf, and the other one is the Q Theatre. So those were the only 2 in the last 10 years. Q Theatre. Yeah. The other also, and then I asked him the next question was, over the last 3 years, and again, we're just doing this on a quick, over the last 3 years, we've also provided 3 guarantees to other organisations. So this is when they're doing their own financing, but we're standing there in terms of a guarantee in terms of the bank line. The one is the Maraetai, and I think that's an extension or something on a community facility. And then the other one is the Woodhill Equestrian Centre, and the final one is the Waitakere Badminton Centre. Yeah. So those are the 3 guarantees. Beyond that, our total grants budget per annum for Auckland Council is around about 126 million. So there's lots and lots of grants, but very few in the scheme of things, guarantees and loans. The other question was on the tram down at Wynyard Quarter. So I've spoken with Panuku. So effectively the reinstatement is in the current LTP budgets. However, there's nothing in the budget in terms of the extension of the tram going to Britomart or to elsewhere. So that is just purely what's in the current LTP budgets is just, I think, the reinstatement of the existing service that was down at Wynyard Quarter previously. The other questions came through was the budget for park, sports and recreation. For this financial year, the budget is 83.4 million, and that 83.4 million, yes. And then that moves to 86.2 million for next year, and that excludes any new items that have been proposed today that might impact on those budgets. Just again, a point to note, that's the basically Park, Sports and Rec. It doesn't include the community facilities budget, which is currently around about 191 million, and that moves to about 194 million for next year. So hopefully that covered all the questions.
I just commend the officers on presenting that information. Thank you.
Cool, thank you. And
Councillor Fletcher. Oh, sorry, Robert, you had something else to add?
yeah, we last, as part of the budget process in November, we did produce this quite detailed book. I know it's a lot of information, and there's a lot of info in here. We will again be going through, once all the decisions have been made through the course of the budget process, we will then again be updating this. So again, you get that really good clarity in terms of the detail and the spend. So we're going through that process at the moment, and we'll have this completed once we finalise the decision-making process.
Excellent. Councillor Fletcher.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Democracy is a funny old thing. You know, we all come to the table here with perhaps our own wish lists, and but at the end of the day, we've got a statutory process we're following. The Mayor's put up a budget, and frankly, it's up to us to interrogate it. The public of Auckland expect no less, that we should be asking the questions. There's no harm in asking questions, and there's no capacity in my mind when a question is asked for smugness to say, oh well, we've dealt with that, we've done this. And I don't profess to have a monopoly on good ideas. I think it's the collective wisdom of all of us that will actually see Auckland right. And it was perhaps the thinking behind amalgamation, where we could become that powerhouse that we've talked about so much, with the relationships that we have with Guangzhou and the relationships with the port, with Los Angeles and so forth in the last couple of days. But when we come to an actual budget, it's all about the art of the possible. It's about showing creativity, and it's about, especially with Amalgamated Auckland, it's about showing fairness. So in terms of the possible and the impossible, it reminds me of the serenity prayer, which is, God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And I think what we're grappling with today is the wisdom to know the difference. So I think it's a jolly good thing that we've decided to reinstate the remission on rates on our houses of spiritual guidance, which we'll deal with next in the piece. But from my perspective, I recognise that there are some magnificent projects that are proceeding that are long, long overdue. And when you think of the fact that we're standing on the shoulders of others, whether it's Robbie, whether it's Len Brown, who never gets acknowledgement, I was saddened that he never got recognised for the tripartite work that he had undertaken in recent times. But we are standing there, each of us has to try and leave things a little better than we found it. And for me today, I'm distinctly underwhelmed, because this is the, near third year into this electoral term. And given the fair wind that we had with a change of government that was more pro-public transport, and given the decisions that had already been taken by Mayor Brown and agreements in terms of getting the government to the table on ATAP, I would have thought that we could have had more of the sense of the possible rather than the impossible. The Mayor has quite correctly reminded us of the limitations, and when you look at the risks ahead of us, and when we think about what the impact of that will be in terms of the implementation of OLLIs, we are going to have to think much more creatively in the future. I hope that we can demonstrate the courage to take things that will go outside of our comfort zone, and maybe things that we haven't yet thought of. There are things in this budget that I feel really terrific about. The baseline funding for CABs is really good. You think of the fantastic work that enables with the volunteers through citizens' advice bureaus. It's only $200,000, but by God, it's probably going to make a difference in terms of what we can offer by way of support to our community. And let me say very publicly, I continue to remain tremendously excited about the targeted rate on the environment. What we have done is we've ended up harnessing all the best staff from the Department of Conservation. They're all working for the Auckland Council now, and we're really getting stuck into some of these projects that are long, long, long overdue. I think the decision by the Hauraki Gulf Forum a couple of days ago to actually go for something really aspirational on 20% for reserves would not have happened but for the fact that we can now see the fact that we're advancing by 10 years the water quality issues and whether it's issues of biosecurity and so forth. But I'm excited about that. I think that was really good. It was a way of getting the cut through. I'm less happy about the fact that we got locked into, because to date, the Prime Minister of the country has not come and sat down and talked to us. I raise this on a regular basis. We have the odd meeting from time to time with ministers coming up to the Mayor's office and we're all invited in. But the Prime Minister's yet to come and sit and talk to us on issues. And in my own case, I would have liked to have been able to ask questions on what we might expect moving forward. Instead of that, I have to rely entirely on the information that's fed back secondhand through the Mayor. And setting aside issues of trust or otherwise, but we've got to somehow command a better relationship with central government. When I spoke at length in this chamber a few weeks ago, it was on trying to force the Mayor to write again to the government to ask them to be fairer to us. And it took a hell of a long time. I think we were sitting here till about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. But I do want them to be fair, and I'm not attributing, this is not about left or right. This is just simply, we've had the national government dump the Maunga Authority on us, which is fantastic. I love the Maunga Authority, but Auckland Council has to do all of the funding. We've had the Hauraki Gulf Marine, well, I was thinking about it with the decisions that we're taking on the forum. But, name another national park in New Zealand that central government doesn't fund. The ratepayers of Auckland and the ratepayers of Waikato and so forth, we're the ones having to carry the can on that. And I do think it's time for a pushback. So we constantly try and fill in. And yes, I was happy to support the fuel tax, but if somebody had told me, and I feel I've been misrepresented, if somebody had said Auckland will be the only region in New Zealand that will have to pay this, I would have been furious. I feel that I've been misled on that particular issue, and I think it's something that's going to have to be revisited with central government in a much more open and honest dialogue. Why should we be penalised simply because we have this enormous population and we're trying to grapple with retrofitting all of the infrastructure that should be in and have taken place a long time ago? So, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to get into some of the frustrations I've got with the budget, but I haven't received your guidance yet on how you are planning to take the vote on this, because there are some things I would like to support and there are a whole range of things that I'm not entirely happy with. So before I conclude my comments, could you please give me some guidance on how you intend to take the vote?
Well, I was really intending to take A and then break B up into transport, communities, environment and regional facilities, because there's a little bit of indication from some people, or we could just take the whole vote, A and B, and people note their concerns in the record, which is the cleanest way to do it.
Well, thank you for that, because there are things that I would like to vote against, and as I say, there are things that I would like to vote for. I'm bitterly disappointed that we have not had the work that I would have liked to have seen before we take the decision on Auckland Transport. There are frustrations that I've got that we haven't foreseen. I don't know whether Auckland Transport in their budget bid are duping us or whether, I cannot believe that they didn't understand before now that there were going to be additional costs in terms of the public good that comes with the increasing patronage on public transport. I think it would be a hugely missed opportunity that we don't take the opportunity to at least demonstrate that we are willing to trial getting kids out of their parents' cars and getting onto public transport with all that school traffic. And I, it's great. I'm not being churlish in any way about Councillor Hills or Councillor Darby, but they may have an inside line to Auckland Transport that none of us or the rest of us have. I don't know how that has happened, but I've got...
Okay, councillors. Councillor Fletcher, I've given you 9 minutes, but keep going. We wrap up.
Yeah, there's an unpleasant atmosphere in this chamber at the moment because it seems that if you raise any concerns, if you want to debate, if you want to ask questions, that somehow you are bullying. You know, I don't see that. In fact, I see that the way that we use power in this place, where some people have more information than others, it is frustrating at times. And that in itself can constitute its own thoughts about the use or the misuse of power. I think for Auckland to be able to deliver on the really big, bold projects for the future, we are going to have to do things differently. We are going to have to set goals and say, yep, we can achieve that. But we're going to really have to look hard at our balance sheet. We're going to have to look at every way in which we can deliver in a way that's equitable across the region. So in conclusion, I really would like to thank the officers. Where I have asked questions, in particular Matthew Walker, I would really like to acknowledge the time that you have given me. And if I'm not voting for all of the measures within this budget, it's no lack of confidence in you. It's just that I don't think we've been bold enough. So thank you.
Right, we have one more speaker indicating. Councillor Newman.
Thank you, Chair. Before I get onto the substance of the comments in relation to the budget, I just want to ask Councillor Hills, with reference to the matter of bullying around this place, I'd ask that if he makes statements like that in the future, I think that does require context. Unless a bully or bullies are named, everybody, I think, is tarred with that statement unless there is clarification as to who he was referring to. So I'd ask that in the future, if that statement is made, that the person is named in the appropriate way, because I don't want people who are not bullies to potentially be presented as bullies by not omitting a clarification as to who is not. Your Worship, I want to thank you for significant parts of your proposal, which I think are appropriate for the moment. And in particular, I want to acknowledge you for your support for funding around graffiti removal on the rail corridor, and your proposal to extend the funding that is required by Waste Solutions for the work around the removal of illegally dumped rubbish. Those are quite important things. They are not significant lines in the budget, but they are important in terms of the impact of our ability to maintain a service which is very important locally. The challenge is going to be actually getting the funding necessary, I think, to achieve a significant improvement across the network in terms of the eradication or the removal of graffiti along the whole rail corridor, because it is looking very, very diminished with the graffiti that is prevalent. Likewise, I think that there is an issue around the settings that we apply in the waste solution space. I would like to see the end of stickering of illegally dumped rubbish and for it to be removed as soon as it is reported. And that will likely require a change in the budget. I think with respect to transport, the difficulty is that I think we are asking Auckland Transport to not look as closely as they should about what is the actual budget required for pavement rehabilitation across the local road network. The tragedy is that the roading and pavement network is sweating and it is grinding under the pressure of an ever-increasing volume of cars and trucks. Now, I attended a workshop recently on the CRL. What did we hear? Well, we heard about the very significant increase in the number of PT trips, an increase from 8.8 million trips up to 11.4 million trips. 11.4 million trips going to 20.2 million trips. That is a massive, massive increase, but it is actually off quite a low base number. If you look at vehicle kilometres travelled, we've gone from 12.7 billion for the year December 2013 to 15.5 billion for the year ended December 2017. That number will be significantly higher now. So it is the renewals budget that Auckland Transport allocates for the roading network that is of real concern to me. And I think it should be a concern to other councillors too, because there will need to be more funding allocated for OPEX and renewals, particularly in the south, which has really borne the brunt of an unfavourable adjustment in the budget over the past 6 years. If that is to be reversed, if the budget is to be ramped up, and if this is to be a process of reallocation of the existing envelope, other communities and other parts of the region should be worried about that, because the south will need significantly more. I think that budget is going to have to be significantly increased, and I don't believe it can simply be deferred to, well, we have to conclude a negotiation with NZTA first. I just want to make one other point, Mr. Chair, and that is with respect to the line of sight around the Ollie's funding. Now, the agreement that was entered into as we signed off the long-term plan was an agreement between members of the governing body and the local boards as part of a co-governance relationship. And the agreement was around the Ollies as identified. It was not around what officers consider to be an Ollie. And I want to see the Ollies recommitted in a form that is broadly similar to what the local boards advocated and what we agreed, because that's what we have to fund. And I think anything short of that is going to compromise the relationship with our co-governance partners. We'll address the issue of rating treatment for the churches in a subsequent item, Chair. But I do want to say to His Worship that I think that we can have difficult debates around this place, but fundamentally it is good to arrive at a budget that I don't think is going to cause massive division around this place this year, and that's a good thing. And for those reasons, Chair, I look forward to supporting this item.
Councillor Lee.
I'll be brief and I'll step back a bit. The trend we see here of unpredicted expenditure, increasing debt, a lower than predicted income is very troubling. And without getting into the politics of the situation, it really does reflect on the structure of the super city itself and whether it's succeeding or not. And I believe, in the opinion of most Aucklanders, the super city is not succeeding. In fact, it's failing. I want to look also at the question of transport, public transport, because it is a fundamental strategic policy of this council that we increase public transport usage for its own sake, but also because Auckland has lagged behind all the other major cities, the comparator cities, to use the term, that we measure ourselves against. And despite the backslapping that I've heard this morning, our situation is not good at all. And to ask for $12 million for an extra 4 million or so passengers is kind of bizarre, really, and say it's unpredicted is extraordinary, especially given the extremely poor results of the last year, which, interestingly enough, no one talked about, but it is a fact. The Mayor mentioned the rapid transit link between Puanui and the airport, and that it was joined up. Well, if you think getting off a plane and getting onto a bus with your bags and then getting off a bus with your bags and getting onto a train is joined up, I think that's not the way the public and travellers think. And so 60 million going on that really is a shocking waste of money when we should be advocating, I think Councillor Fletcher mentioned, advocating to the government and meeting with the government as a council, as we used to express our concerns that the government needs to be doing more for our main strategic mode, our spine, if you like, and that is rail. Electrify to Pukekohe, as a previous government promised in 2013, and getting rail directly to the airport. And forget about Mr. Twyford's Kiwi build on wobbly wheels called Light Rail to Mangere. That's going to fail. But in the meantime, we have a strategic problem at Auckland Airport that we, as a responsible regional authority and also as a major shareholder, should be taking a lead on. We're not. We're settling for second best there. When it comes to the City Rail Link, which is a keystone project for this council, we've had $1 billion blowout. And I have to say I was amazed at the lack of detail, the lack of transparency around that blowout. And I'm also deeply troubled that this won't be the end of it. Again, unless there is a major change in our attitude, a major change in the attitude of the leadership of this council, both political and administrative, we're going to keep getting these blowouts. What we've heard, another one from regional facilities, blowout over the Aotea Centre. Even the pathetic dolphin project is blown out. Fake dolphins, because dolphins are not connected to the wharf. That's why they're called dolphins. But here in Auckland, they are. They're a wharf extension. Despite political promises, there would never be one. Then we have Ports of Auckland predicting that their dividend is going to be slashed because they're going to spend a whole lot of money on things they want to do. And there's been no input from the shareholder because the shareholder, which was Auckland Council Investments Limited, was abolished by the council, and so we have a vacuum. And so the Ports is going on its merry way, spending money, huge amounts of money, without any checks and balances or input from we who are meant to be the shareholder. Again, failure of leadership. In terms of this particular budget, this particular annual plan, I have to say that all I can see here is a trajectory towards failure. In other words, if this was a private company, and a private company of this scale, the metrics we have, the numbers we've been given, the trajectory we are on is a trajectory for going bankrupt if this was a private company. So all the soothing noises you've heard around the table about everything is fine, don't worry about the $500 million blowout on the CRL, that's to be expected, and all the other ones, I'll predict this. There's going to be a very different story in a few short months about the real financial crisis Auckland is in. Once the election is over, the reality will be revealed, and it won't be pretty, and the people of Auckland will not be happy about it. So, Mr. Chairman, I have to say I can't support this particular budget, and there's one small point I'd make, it's a minor point, but it reflects the inequity that seems to be built into this budget and the thinking behind it. The Mayor promised that he would depart from the agreed long-term plan, and rather than have a 3.5% rates increase, he would reduce it to 2.5% rates increase. That was before the last election, for whatever reason. However, a whole raft of other charges have been lumped onto the people of Auckland, including the fuel tax, which Auckland pays and nobody else in the country. But one of the ways of getting around the 2.5 rates increase is to levy so-called targeted rates. One in particular is quite odious because it's quite inequitable and unfair in the way it is levied. And so Auckland Central and Waiheke Island and other parts of this region and the city have to pay it, and other parts of the region get off scot-free. And it is totally unfair and inequitable. And it was brought in without adequate consultation. So I'm afraid this is not good enough. Auckland deserves better than this sort of mediocrity. Thank you.
Well, that wasn't Councillor Sayers, right?
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Councillor Sayers, then it's right to reply with the Mayor.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, well, Mr. Mayor, it's great to see some of these major projects being pushed forward in your budget, so congratulations on those. But I do have to express some concern over some of the items, and I'll make those notes in due course when it comes to the vote. And what's concerning me, Mr. Mayor, is the, and I just want to express it at the debating table, is the rural voice. A $5 million grant to the city mission is very admirable, but it's equivalent to over what the annual road sealing budget is for our region across Auckland. So that can be a bit hard to support when it's probably more seen as a social service in my mind than an asset building service and core business, which road sealing would be. So I'd just like to express my concern around and it may be more appropriate to address in a future budget, Mr. Mayor, but I just want to raise it, and that's around the road sealing budget that we did approve of $121 million. And just like the $28 billion budget for ATAP, you expect that to be divided evenly over the 10 years, where the $121 million budget for the seal extension programs hasn't been divided into $12 million a year. So I just perhaps ask for your insistence and guidance through the Treasury, through to Auckland Transport, that may be rectified. Thank you.
Okay. All right, Mayor Goff.
Well, thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, and can I thank all councillors who have contributed to this debate. There are different points of view around the table. That's never been different around a council, and it's particularly never different when it's an election year, and I suspect there's been a little bit of practicing for that to begin with. But I want to focus pretty much on what I think is amazingly positive about our city. We all sit around this table because we believe in Auckland, and this is a city that is booming at the moment. It is absolutely booming. More cranes on the horizon than any single city in the United States, $73 billion worth of investment from the private sector, a record level of investment from us as a council in the infrastructure for housing, for transport and the environment. And last year, the overwhelming majority of councillors joined around this table to support the long-term plan, and the big increase that we achieved in that, $28 billion in the Auckland Transport Alignment Project, $28 billion, and less than 10 of that from us and $18 billion from central government. Would I like more from central government? I'd always like more from central government, but I've been on both sides of the fence and I've got some idea of what you can achieve and how you can achieve it. For the first time, we've got an Auckland Transport Alignment Project that does not have a major deficit in it. I remember sitting down, and I got on well with him, Simon Bridges, when he was Minister of Transport, and saying, I think the Deputy Mayor was with me, and saying, Simon, what do we do about this, I think it was an $8 billion deficit that we've got? And there wasn't an answer at that point. But we got an Auckland Transport Alignment Project that filled that gap. Is it enough? Of course it's not enough. Do we deserve more? In the sense that 55% of the growth of the city, of this country, is coming in this city? Yes, we do. Will we continue to push for it? Yes. Will we do it in a way that maximises our chances of success? rather than just alienating the partner that has to be a partner with us, the answer is we will do it in a smart way, not simply a loud way. And that's what our intention is. On transport, I think it's fantastic. We got the figures today from Auckland Transport that we will hit 100 million passenger trips 13 months ahead of forecast. 100 million passenger trips 13 months before forecast. Now, we celebrate that. Of course we celebrate that because we need more people in public transport. But we also know that that increases the cost of the subsidies that are paid on fares. That's a cost that we willingly need to pay, and we need to look longer term because we hope longer term to keep on with the really high level of increase in swap to public transport. Can we celebrate the transport, the environment progress that we've made? And you know, I talked about water quality. I think it's fantastic that this council, with the backing of Aucklanders, no secret special rate, we went out to Aucklanders and we asked them, will you pay the special rate to improve the quality of water on your beaches? And 2 to 3 to 1, they said, yes, get on and do it. And that's exactly what we're doing, bringing it forward 20 years. I think that that is really good. I haven't mentioned predator control. That's fantastic. Out in the ward where I live, we have practically wiped out the predators. It won't last. We'll have to do it again in 2 years' time. And we've got the native birds coming back and booming. The Million Trees program, not only greening the city and absorbing the carbon and stopping the erosion and the siltation, but a habitat for our native birds to come back to the city. There are good things happening. Look around the Gulf and the Gulf Islands. Fantastic. And I give credit to all, not only to this council, but to our predecessors that had that foresight. Being a governor is about having foresight and vision. Being a governor is also about keeping your feet firmly on the ground in regard to fiscal responsibility. Because the one thing that our voters will not forgive us for is if we blow the budget. And I've had so many conversations with people around, we want to increase the spending and we want to cut the revenue. Well, guess what? Try practicing that on your household budget and see how long you last. We know we've got to be fiscally responsible, and that's what this budget is. Absolutely transparent. We get the Auditor General's reports, and they give us a clean bill of health. In fact, the Auditor General told me that we were by far the most advanced council in this country. It was one of the first things that I was told when I talked to them. We've got an audit committee that's now chaired by somebody from the private sector, outside, transparent, open, clear. And that's the way that we've got to be. We've looked at the question of how much pressure we can put on our ratepayers. Now, we'd all like to spend more. We've all got the dreams that we'd like to spend more on. But never let us forget that many of the people that are funding us, their rates come in 4 quarterly instalments. They are not wealthy people. They are struggling to meet their budgets, and they expect us to be reasonable and responsible in terms of rate increases. And boy, I am proud that while this huge increase in investment is coming, that we have kept our rate increases to just about the lowest in the country and absolutely lower than any other metropolitan city, any other growth city. So we are doing it responsibly. We've got our Value for Money committee that looks at how we can find the savings, and we've got projected $500 million worth of savings, not by cutting services, but by actually finding better ways of doing things. And that's our obligation as well, and I acknowledge Councillor Desley Simpson, who's been promoting that in addition. Social goals. In a couple of months' time, we will fully implement our living wage for those that are employed directly by this council. And I'm proud of that. We are one of the biggest employers in the country to bring in the living wage. And don't let anybody say we can't afford to give a person a wage that they can afford to live on. This is an expensive city, and we've got a duty to our employees, and we're meeting it. Likewise with the homelessness, and I thank Councillor Watson for his comments and others that have made the comments about home ground and support for the city mission. They are supporting us, they are helping the most vulnerable, and we are helping them. And I put a big thank you out to all of our partners, the housing agencies that work with us, to have housed nearly 1,000 people in the last 2 years that were previously in emergency housing, in cars or on the streets. Great. Is it good enough? Not yet. Won't be good enough until we get everybody out of that situation and into proper housing. But are we making progress on that? Yes. It's a team effort between council and the housing agencies, and it's great to see that happening. Look, there are lots of other things. I just need to mention the City Rail link again. I've heard the word blowout. If it blow out, this council decided quite deliberately and quite rightly that they were going to put $250 million extra money into future-proofing our City Rail link. Is there anyone around this table that is opposed to that? It wasn't a blowout. We did it quite deliberately. We said we're going to have 54,000 people an hour travelling on the City Rail link, and we're going to provide for them because you can't retrofit a station tunnel. And, you know, blowout, we put extra 300 million extra into contingency money. Is that a blowout? No, we haven't spent it yet, but we are being wise and saying in this environment that inflicts the whole of Australasia, is it wise to do that? Of course we'll do it. Do we have to pay more for construction costs? Well, if there's somebody that can point out to me a way of letting a contract, other than by tender, open and competitive, with the best tenderers we can find capable of doing the job at the best price, please tell me, because I don't know a better way of letting a contract than that, does anybody. So there are fantastic things happening. This city is going to be in great shape for 2021. That's when we're showcasing ourselves to the world. But actually the most important thing is we need to be in great shape for ordinary working Aucklanders. And we're creating a city with a better environment, more houses being built, a transport network being built, long after Robbie first proposed it, but finally we're getting there. Have a look at the new stations in Otahuhu that I helped to open, at Manukau bus station, and there were a number of councillors here at that one. The plans for Puanui. Is that a great idea? It's a fantastic idea. We'll deliver it in 18 months, congestion-free, from the airport on public transit to the city. It's the quickest way of doing it. It's not the only way to do it, and in longer term, we will have direct public transport to the airport. But I think today, Mr Chairman, we should be celebrating what this city has achieved. We should be honest about the challenges we face. They are the growing pains of a city that has never grown so fast before, a city that is the globally competitive and international city of New Zealand, and people want to live here. That's the most important judgment. 40,000 more people each year want to come here and live. And that is a sign that this is a great city, and our work is to make it greater, working together. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mayor. Right, I'm going to move this as a block, but we're going to take our time at the end, so those that want to note against is fully recorded, so please don't get up and rush off to lunch until we've got everything noted. Okay, so I'm going to put A and all of B. All those in favour? Aye. Against? And you want that recorded, Councillor Lee? Okay, right. Now, specific noting against any particular clauses, Councillor Fletcher? Okay, you don't want to mention them publicly, sorry, just... Okay, all right. Yep, okay. Anyone else wants to note against any particular section? No? Oh. You're happy, just come to the table as well, okay? All right then, thank you very much, folks. We have carried that. We're going to have a half-hour lunch. We'll come back at 10 past.
Now we wait for items.